If you are receiving this transmission, you are the Cynical Militia. You are listening to Professor Cynical on all available frequencies. This is not a test.
Coming to you from a studio in Glasgow, this is Professor Cynical.
Good day, you absolute legends, and boy do I have a treat of a video today. Now, back in 2016, Hello Games released No Man's Sky up onto the world, and it was version 1.0. Everybody was really excited. It was one of the best-selling games of the year, and it was all installed. Everyone jumped on, and the backlash started because the game launched without any of the features that Hello Games had promised, including with, well, even how the game even looked with the E3 trailers. Virtually none of it was in the game, other than literally the procedural generation, and that was a very watered-down version of what they originally promised. But you know, we're not going to go back into the entire history of what happened because, as we know, No Man's Sky has had the biggest redemption story, and Hello Games have had the biggest redemption story in development and gaming history. It's been amazing to watch the team grow. But back in 2016, version 1.0 is where all of this controversy started. And in today's video, ladies and gentlemen, I want to travel back to 2016. I want to play version 1.0, and I want to see if it was really as bad as I remember it. The way I see this is that has time warped my memory of what the game was like back then? Was it actually better than I remember? Or is it worse than even I remember it? So that's what we're going to do today, ladies and gentlemen. So let's gear up. Let's go back to the OG No Man's Sky. Let's get into it. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to version 1.0 No Man's Sky 2016 version, and this is the very first available version that we had on Steam, and it is already looking pretty dated by current No Man's Sky standards. I mean, the foliage, the fauna, everything just looks very 2016. And the thing is, when this game was first released, the cap for the FPS of this game was at 30 FPS. You had to go into the menu afterwards and fix it. But I mean, there is the ship, and wow, look at the very first ship that we had, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we all start off with this ship, even in current No Man's Sky, but it does look, again, pretty dated compared to how it looks now. And yeah, I mean, the cutscenes, there was no skippable cutscenes or anything like that. So all these black bars everywhere and all the information, all the text, we all had to sit through this. That was the first thing I remember, definitely. But yeah, let's look into the options. Oh, wow. The Discoveries tab, the journey and controls, everything just looks so dated. So I'm going to tweak about these settings. I'm going to remove the, 30 plus FPS, and I'm going to try and make this game look as best as possible before we continue, because right now it's already pretty rough. Okay, one restart and max settings tweak later. This is how the game looked back in 2016. Now, as you can see, all of, for example, the ship inventory, I mean, and that was one of the biggest complaints back then, that we didn't have any inventory space, and believe you me, we didn't have virtually any. And on top of that, all the things that you collect from like today's No Man's Sky, which is like ferrite dust and so on, was all named completely differently. So for example, ferrite dust was iron oxide, which, to be fair, I wish they would have kept the naming scheme. That's one thing I do miss about OG No Man's Sky. I just feel like the naming scheme back then was actually really cool, and collecting iron actually just felt more right. Now, ladies and gentlemen, don't get me started on the OG Sentinels. Now, these pesky little bleeders was very overpowered. I mean, you literally started with basically a multi-tool, or should I say a mining beam that was part of the multi-tool, which was weaker than water. It wasn't very good at all. And the Sentinels back then hadn't had any kind of balance or anything like that, and there was no way to like tweak the settings to make the game a little bit easier. And yeah, those Sentinels, ladies and gentlemen, those were the pure fear factor back in 2016 OG No Man's Sky. But If you manage to take them down, they still drop the barrels and you still get the items from the barrels. But again, the naming scheme is completely different from what it is today, including the items that you even get. And oh boy, how lucky do we have it now? We have the terrain manipulator, for example, where you can go ahead and mine resources. Back then, we just had the mining beam. The mining beam did everything. It was your combat tool. It was basically the terrain manipulator, what we use today. It was everything, the jack of all trades. And back then, you had to go ahead and mine massive rocks that would basically just float in the sky. You could literally cut right through the middle of these things and it would just float in the sky and stay there. I mean, physics in 2016 was just peak. I mean, it's not really much better today, No Man's Sky, to be fair. I mean, maybe that's something they could address. But nonetheless, mining was done this way. And for example, there was no like big pools of copper or chromatic metal or whatever the case is that you want to dig underneath the ground or in like the ground and, you know, you have to mine it that way. Nope, everything was above the ground. Now, backpack, or should I say exosuit space, was at a premium. This is all you literally started with. And after mining anything other than maybe 3 or 4 rocks, everything was literally full. And you had to make room, but the required materials to build a lot of items that you need to continue on your journey required multiple slots, so you constantly ran out of them, and there was no real quick easy way to get more exosuit slots unless you was very lucky to stumble across something on the planet, which we'll get onto a little bit later, which would expand the exosuit slot just a tiny little bit. But for the beginning part of it, it really wasn't easy. It really wasn't easy. Many people didn't even get off the planet's surface because it was quite literally too difficult. And again, I remember that being one of the big critiques in 2016. What if you managed to fix up your ship without any sort of prompting? Because you can see that it just says leave the planet and it just says repair launch thrusters, repair pulse engine, and refuel launch thrusters. But in 2016, there was nothing past that to tell you exactly what you needed to collect and where to collect it from. There was no hand-holding in No Man's Sky 2016 back in the day, which, again, frustrated a lot of players because they didn't know what to collect or how to collect it. And again, I'm only able to do this because I played back in 2016 and I've played current No Man's Sky, as we all know, to this day. And there is a lot of similarities game mechanic wise that still transpire to today. But imagine being a brand new player in 2016, being thrown into this vast universe, this vast procedurally generated world, and not having a single clue what to do. There was no tutorials. Like I said, no hand-holding of any kind. And again, that was one of the very big criticisms of 2016. So what about space stations in No Man's Sky? In 2016 No Man's Sky, space stations were completely barren, and there have been many iterations of space stations over the years, and they've all added, different things, different features as time went on. But in 2016, they was virtually barren. I mean, you could go ahead and land in them. That wasn't an issue, but there wasn't even, for example, an appearance modifier. Well, that really makes actually quite a lot of sense because in 2016 No Man's Sky, you was locked to first person, so what was the point of having an appearance modifier? There was only a guy in a corner, in a room somewhere, and a shop. That's basically it. That's all you got. And yes, ships as well did land in the space station. NPC ships did land, and you could go ahead and trade with them. But again, in 2016 version of No Man's Sky, the trading looked a lot different than what we know in No Man's Sky today. For example, there are no pilots to really speak of because the pilots never actually jump out of their ship. Instead, you need to wait until the ship has landed, and then when it does land, you need to then interact with the ship, and then the NPC would pop up on screen. And it looks very 2016 as you can see. God, I miss the days when the games looked like this. Now, another feature that has always been in No Man's Sky is the ability to scan items. That's always been an established feature, and it did add to the discovery page where you could go ahead and discover all the plants and fauna and animals. But again, it looked very different because immediately you would scan a bunch of stuff, and where in No Man's Sky today you'll get instantly, for example, credited units for doing such tasks. Back then you had to go into the Discoveries tab itself and you had to manually upload everything. A very welcome change today, I'm not gonna lie. But on the other hand, one of the really cool things I always liked about this was it actually showed you a whited out picture, a cutout picture if you will, of all of the items and animals that you did in fact scan, which in 2016 was great if you was a YouTube content creator because you had all of these images that you could actually use for videos already pre-cut out, and that was something I always remembered at the time, thinking it was actually really cool. Now, something that we do currently see in modern No Man's Sky are these drop pods, because inside of these drop pods is where we can go ahead and upgrade our exosuit to give us that little sliver of extra space. Now, if you came across these on random chance in the wild in 2016 No Man's Sky, you would honestly think it's Christmas because, like I said, backpack space, or should I say exosuit space, was at a pure premium. So these things were like gold dust to find, and everybody always ran out to try and find as many as possible before they even started to do anything in the game. So let's talk about quests and storyline in 2016 No Man's Sky. What was that like? Well, it was nightmare fuel, and even jumping back in 2025 to 2016 No Man's Sky, it just really cemented the fact that the quest line and the whole way to do it was nightmare fuel, and there's no other real easy way to say it. And the reason being is because these quest markers that would pop up, and they would pop up very randomly, would say, okay, this is an outpost, this is where you need to go to, which is all well and good, but there was no way to know how to trigger these events. They would just kind of randomly, sporadically appear from time to time in order for you to continue your journey in No Man's Sky. And once you finished one, there wasn't then a direct thing to do after that. It would literally a waiting game, or until you did something random, because again, there was no handhold in this game at all to trigger the next event. So nobody knew what they was doing half of the time. In fact, when I was playing in 2016, I didn't know what I was doing at all. Now, for me, back in 2016, one of the most frustrating things that just didn't work was, for example, to call your starship at one of these landing pads. It just never ever worked. And I'm just doing this for demonstration because it didn't matter if a ship was already landed or not there. I mean, you would go ahead and spend your very hard-earned units because you had to go and get yourself a bypass ship in order to activate these things. And yeah, these call starship things just never ever ever worked. I don't recall anybody at the time actually ever getting these things to work at all. Now, like I said, I'm just doing it just to see what it was like, whether or not it was something that I remember like truthfully happening, or whether or not it's just something as time went on I just imagined, because it was a very long time ago. But no, it never worked. It just never ever ever worked, which, as we know, has been patched out, and you can call your starship, which obviously doesn't cost any launch fuel or anything else to use one of these landing pads and take off. But you know, if you parked your ship far away like I did in my run through here, I had to walk back 15 minutes in real world time to get back to my ship, because there was no way to even call my ship back then, because again, in 2016 we never had the luxury of a call ship button. So it is what it is. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention it because I'm still pretty frustrated about that. Now, the galaxy map has been mostly unchanged throughout the years, so it still looks exactly the same, more or less. The UI looks obviously different and a little bit dated, but for example, the actual galaxies themselves all look exactly the same as current No Man's Sky, which is absolutely awesome. But we are going to go over to the Atlas, because yes, in 2016 we had the Atlas interface. And have you noticed, we've been playing all of this time, well, you've been watching this recording now for about 13.5 minutes, but for me it's been more like 4 or 5 hours, and we've still not yet got ourselves into the anomaly. But don't worry, that is coming, because the anomaly actually happens quite late into the game, and it's a little weird. But yeah, let's go over to now the Atlas and see how that looked. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Atlas. Now, the Atlas itself hasn't really changed at all since 2016. Sure, the modern Atlas has a little bit more, you know, effects going on. You have like smoke and lighting and things like that have been tweaked. But for the mission and questline stuff itself, and even just how it generally looks, nothing has changed. The Atlas quest path, or should I say the quest line, has been pretty much the original quest that has always been in No Man's Sky. And then afterwards, we know that the team have gone ahead and give us way more quests, such as, for example, the Artemis quest line and so on. But in 2016, there was none of that. It was literally just the Atlas one. And these stones as well still work, and they still give you certain things and, you know, either new language or whatever the case is. So nothing has changed there. Now, let's talk about the anomaly, because, you know, it's much later on into the game now. I think I'm at like 7-8 hours into the game at this point, and I jumped to a very random system, and then the space anomaly decides to appear finally. And back in 2016, there was nowhere to call the space anomaly. There was nothing. It just randomly appeared. So, okay, that was a thing. And, you know, you would think that you go through these wonderful doors, as we currently do in No Man's Sky, and it would open up into a grandiose thing, and, you know, there's ships and everything. Nope, this is what we're greeted to. A single landing spot and a door. This was 2016 No Man's Sky's anomaly, ladies and gentlemen. This was it. This is all you got. Again, there was no multiplayer in this, and the team at the time didn't want multiplayer in the game, so the anomaly looked like this. It was for a very single player experience. Inside was, you know, Paula and Nada. That was it. No other NPCs that we see in No Man's Sky today. Absolutely nothing. And again, questline, there was no questline with the anomaly as far as I can recall. Even going into, for example, going into dialect and dialogue with Nada was literally pointless, because it literally gave you a small bit of information and that's it. But there wasn't any mission markers past that point. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how I remember No Man's Sky back in 2016. It was barren, it was fun, but was it as bad as I remember? So, ladies and gentlemen, 2016 No Man's Sky, what is my verdict? Was it as bad as I remember it to be? And yeah, it was gruesome. It was hell. It was absolutely horrific to play. I mean, there was no tutorial missions. There was barely even a quest line. You didn't know what you was doing 99.9% of the time. Things would just randomly pop up here and there telling you need to go here, but not give you any more of a direction other than that. And for example, the anomaly compared to what it is today looks very outdated. And even then, there was no clear cut to why the anomaly even existed, because it was just a thing. And yeah, overall, it was very, very bad. And that's not even to account for the amount of times I crashed during the recording session for just this, for this demonstration video, for what it, to just show what the game looked like back in 2016. I mean, I had so many crashes, so many problems. There was so many bugs and glitches and artifacting. It was a interesting look back into 2016, that's for sure. But yeah, it was pretty bad, ladies and gentlemen, back in 2016. But let me know what you think about 2016 No Man's Sky. Did you play it when it first released? Have you played it since? Have you gone back on Steam? Have you been playing it on PC? And have you played the original release of No Man's Sky? Let me know in the comment section down below. Or if you haven't, and this is the first time you've seen 2016 No Man's Sky, what did you think about it? Do you think it looks dated? Do you think that it looks fairly similar to No Man's Sky today? And do you think it would be easier for you to play it than the time that I've had playing it? Let me know in the comment section down below, you know what to do. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, that's everything from me here today, and as always, my name is Professor Cynical, and I'll catch you all again in the next one. Bye for now.
Join the Cynical Militia on Professor Cynical's Patreon. No exclusive perks needed. Just your passion for epic space adventures and bold discussions keeps the galaxy spinning. Choose your tier. Fuel the mission. Repent Jar. $1 a month. Forgiveness for your ad block sins. A pack of Monster. $5 a month. Keep the creative thrusters firing. Absolute Legends. $10 a month. That got me thinking. $50 a month. A bold, questionable financial decision that screams you're all in. Why join? Every pledge strengthens the Cynical Militia, keeping Professor Cynical's YouTube channel a thriving hub for No Man's Sky fans, craving news, updates, and unfiltered discussions. You're not just a supporter, you're part of a galactic community that dares to explore and think differently. Don't just traverse the stars, own them. Enlist now at patreon.com/ProfessorCynical1 and let's conquer the No Man's Sky universe together.